All right, we've been away for a couple of weeks, but we're back. Red versus Blue, number 47. My name is Mike Stark.
And I'm Keith Curry.
And we have decided we're going to be doing this for a while. We initially thought once the election was over, there wouldn't be anything to talk about. And boy, were we wrong, right?
We were, Mike. I'll tell you what, every 30 seconds, there's a new cabinet pick and something going on. We all remember when Susie Wiles was named chief of staff and she said she was going to keep the clown car out of the White House. Well, the clown car made it through the gates at Mar-a-Lago, and it ended up to being a Greyhound bus, and it was fully packed. So we have the good, the bad, and the ugly of cabinet appointments. So where should we start first?
Well, let's start wherever you want, because everywhere is craziness.
Well, let's start with the good ones, because they're easier to identify. Marco Rubio at State is a qualified U.S. Senator. Doug Burgum at Interior, the former governor of North Dakota, finally got a job. Pam Bondi at AG will be certainly an infinitely better pick than Matt Gaetz. Not to say she's a good pick, but she's at least a lawyer and qualified. Right. Doug Collins at Veterans Affairs, Duffy at Transportation, Ludnick at Commerce. Interesting point here is some of his appointees are selling hundreds of millions of dollars of stock in order to take their jobs. That's going to affect the stock market. Wright at Energy, Scott Bissennett at Treasury is going to be a good pick. Lori Chavez DeRenner, an Oregon congresswoman who was defeated in this last election, is going to go to Labor. She actually has the support of the Teachers Union and the Teamsters. And today there was an editorial in the Wall Street Journal opposing her appointment because she's too cozy, in their opinion, with Labor. Dave Weldon, a former congressman who was actually a physician, is going to run the Center for Disease Control. So those are all sort of mainstream picks that people, I think, can get behind and would be representative in just about any administration.
Let's move on to the fun stuff, though, because there's fun stuff. Come on, let's face it. It's fun.
It's going to be fun for somebody. First of all, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at HHS. Ludnick, as head of the transition team, said there was no way in hell Kennedy was going to run HHS, but there he is. And all of his stories are being regurgitated in the press, including his sexual abuse stories. Dr. Oz is going to run Medicare. Lord knows what could possibly go wrong there. Tulsi Gabbard, who is actually on a TSA watch list because of her association with foreign adversaries, most notably Syria and Russia, is going to be head of national intelligence. That is certainly an eyebrow-raising appointment to former Democratic congresswoman from Hawaii who ran for president, trashed Trump, but is now all in on conspiracy theories. And then you got Pete Hegseth at the Department of Defense, who was a Fox News host. He did serve in the Army, was appointed to Iraq, who is facing very serious charges for sexual abuse, for which he entered a non-disclosure agreement and paid money to a attendee at the Republican Women's Conference in Monterey. Scott Turner at HUD is a former professional football player who had a mid-level job in the administration the last time. Not clear that he knows anything about housing. And, of course, the ultimate bad nomination was Matt Gaetz, who lasted all of about a week. And I just can imagine the meetings that, J.D. Vance is taking him around to talk to the senators.
Right.
And he sits down and he makes his case, and the senator looks at him and says, basically, Matt, you are such a big, total, and complete flaming asshole. There's no way in hell you're going to get confirmed. Move on down the hall. Yeah, and after hearing that message about 6 times, they got the message. When Trump said he was going to protect women, he didn't mention that he was going to protect them by putting all of the predators in his cabinet where he keep an eye on them. But that seems to be his approach.
What about the Secretary of Education?
The Secretary of Education is Linda McMahon, who was the Small Business Administrator head in the previous administration. She, of course, was married to Vince McMahon with Worldwide Wrestling and is noted for getting in the ring herself and doing, the typical stunts of wrestling. For those who think wrestling is real, you'll undoubtedly think Linda McMahon is a great pick for education.
That's funny. So you pretty much covered everybody there, right? Is there anybody we left out? We can't leave anybody out, right?
Well, there's a few lower level jobs. He's particularly focused on filling the jobs, most notably in the health area, a lot of whom have been, Fox News contributors or personalities. So we haven't really fleshed all of those out. With the exception of Treasury, the economic posts are not yet picked. He did pick one of the authors of Project 2025 to be the head of OMB. So for everybody who thought, he's not going to work on Project 2025, well, the guy who wrote it is now in charge of management and budget. So it's an administration that's going to have a lot of big personalities. People have been picked because of their ability to be on television. Not all of them have done a good job while they've been on television. And I think not all of them are really equipped with the background knowledge and policy to be able to stand up to a 40-minute interview on subject areas.
Right.
But it's going to be exciting.
Now, so it sounds like, though, he's going to be pretty much ready to hit the ground running when he's inaugurated with all of these quick picks and all of that. Is that tradition? Do most presidents have their positions picked before they're actually inaugurated?
Yes. And Congress, remember, changes over on January 3rd. So typically what happens in this intervening time now is that background checks are done by the FBI so that when the new Congress comes into office, and even the current Congress could do it too, the Democrats may very well call a hearing on some of these people. But when the new Congress comes in, they can hold hearings, they can advance people so that people are in a position to be confirmed on January 20th or 21st and be in place running the departments. It's not uncommon for 4 or 5 of the department heads to be delayed for a month or two, but not very long. And then they begin with the sub-cabinet appointments, which take longer. He is making the announcements and appointments faster than most presidents have done. And clearly, not all of them are getting the vetting and the background reports that others have. He's also not using the FBI for background checks. He's using private security, which is not going to pass muster. Ultimately, there'll be more. And because of the nature of the picks, there is a real chance that these people are going to self-immolate when they get to their confirmation hearings. At least some of them will.
Now, what is this business about the president being able to cancel Congress or something so that they don't have to go through the hearings? Can you explain that process and what are the chances of that happening?
Back when everybody traveled by horse to get to the Capitol, the president became president in March and Congress did not convene until July because you couldn't get there until July because of the roads and the rain.
Right. The
president had the right to make recess appointments who served for up to 2 years until Congress could then confirm the appointment going forward. That has really fallen out of style because Congress doesn't go into recess. Particularly if there's a changeover in party, the other party keeps them in session to prevent recess appointments and to prevent any kind of shenanigans during any kind of changeover. So what happens is one senator shows up, calls the meeting to order, says the Pledge of Allegiance, and then goes back to his office. And they all get their per diem for that. So that's sort of an anachronistic mood. Now, the thought is that the president could adjourn Congress on his own and then make his recess appointments, and he would have 2 years of people in office. That is considered highly offensive in the separation of powers and relationships between the executive and the legislative branch. And you're hearing a lot of Republican senators saying that is simply not the way to go here. It's worth noting that Julie Su, the Secretary of Labor, has been denied a confirmation vote, and Biden made her the acting secretary. You can serve in an acting role for up to 1 year. There may be some of that goes on. But again, that is considered highly offensive. And anybody who is named acting, unless there's a change in Congress to the advantage of the appointing president, is generally never confirmed.
So it sounds like those shenanigans are not going to happen because there is pushback from the GOP as well.
There is. And as we saw with Matt Gaetz, some people just can't be swallowed. And I think Kennedy and Gabbard are certainly people for whom one would not expect a Republican majority to emerge. And Hegseth is probably on the bubble. The rest of them I don't think are going to have any trouble. But those three, who are the three most problematic remaining after Matt Gaetz, are, I think, challenged.
Well, at least C-SPAN is going to have some good TV.
They will indeed. They will indeed. Must-see TV.
Must-see TV, exactly. All right. Now, you were going to talk a little bit about the history of appointments, right?
Well, I thought it's worth putting what's happening today in context because denying presidential cabinet appointments goes all the way back to John Adams, a fellow by the name of Lucius Stockton, who was appointed Secretary of State in 1801, was the first presidential cabinet appointee to be refused confirmation. Andrew Jackson, one of the most popular presidents of his day, appointed Roger Taney, who later became a Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice, to the cabinet. His was rejected by the Congress. John Tyler had 4 appointments rejected. Eisenhower appointed Lewis Strauss, Secretary of Commerce. If you saw the Oppenheimer movie, that was one of the subplots in the movie. He was rejected. Johnson, who had huge majorities in the Congress, failed to get Abe Fortas appointed at the Supreme Court and Robert Ward appointed at HUD. Nixon lost Haynsworth and Carswell to the Supreme Court. Carter had to withdraw, or in fact, he never even submitted Ted Sorensen to be head of the CIA because of issues he had. Reagan lost Bork and Ginsburg on the court. George Bush appointed John Tower, a distinguished senator, to be the Secretary of Defense, and he was rejected. I actually have a personal story there. He was rejected because he was deemed by his colleagues to be an alcoholic. And I was the assistant to the Federal Transit Administrator. We went up to Capitol Hill to see Senator Tower. I accompanied the boss, and I wasn't going to stay for the meeting, but we were going to talk in the car, and then I was going to help him find the place because it was one of those hideaway offices that they have in the Capitol where they go between sessions. And Senator Tower met him at the door holding a bottle of what appeared to be very expensive California Cabernet. And he took him into his hideaway office to lobby him for funding for the Houston Metro, which, by the way, was funded and is running today. So Senator Tower was well known to kick one back. Bill Clinton had 5 nominees rejected. We all remember Zoe Baird and Kimball Wood on the Supreme Court, who had a undocumented housekeeper. That seems like a quaint problem today. Anthony Lake failed to go to the CIA, Herschel Gerber to the Department of Labor, Bobby Ray Inman to the DOD. So he had the record of 5. Bush failed with Harriet Miers and Bernard Cleric at Homeland Security. He, of course, later was an associate of Rudy Giuliani's and Trump's later on and was pardoned by Trump. Obama lost Tom Daschle. Tom Daschle was a Senate Democratic leader, and because of tax avoidance issues, failed to be confirmed at HHS. Bill Richardson, the former governor of New Mexico, failed at Commerce. Merrick Garland was denied a vote for the Supreme Court. And then we have Trump himself. In the first term, Andy Putzer was denied at DOL, Pat Shanahan at DOD, Ronnie Jackson at Veterans, Chad Wolf at Homeland Security, John Ratliff at National Security. Now, he was appointed once, denied, and then later was appointed a year later and confirmed. Trump himself had 5 rejected nominees. So with Matt Gaetz, he now has the record of having most refused nominees of 6 of any president in American history. And of course, Biden and Nadira Tandon was not confirmed at OVM. And Julie Su at Department of Labor serves in an acting capacity because she was denied a vote. She can only be an acting person for 1 year. And that's considered a highly offensive measure on Capitol Hill. Trump has now set the record for rejected cabinet nominees or withdrawn cabinet nominees of all presidents. So it's not uncommon, and it will not be uncommon if his subsequent nominees are also rejected.
Right. You put down a big list of people that have gone through the process and failed, but I don't think that list had anything as colorful as the list that is out there now, right?
No, it's one thing if you're known among your colleagues for having a drink or two, or if you have some tax issues, or if you have a nanny who you didn't pay, payroll taxes on.
Right.
It's quite another thing to be accused of sexual abuse or being a predator, or being a quack, or stealing roadkill, or having a worm in your brain. These are going to be unique issues facing his appointees.
Well, we'll see again. Must see TV on C-SPAN without a doubt.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's cover a couple other quick things. The election results, because the numbers have narrowed a little bit. Now, Donald Trump is still going to say it was a mandate, no matter what it is. But you have some figures that say it was a little tighter than maybe some people think.
Well, Mike, we're doing this 2.5 weeks after Election Day. And of course, they're still counting ballots in California. So that's going to narrow the spread even more. But right now, Trump is under 50%. He'll likely end up at 49.9 or 49.8%. He'll have a margin of about 1.5% over Harris. Republicans will get 53 senators. The Democrats look to have closed the gap a little bit with the Republicans in the Senate, in the House, 1 or 2 seats. We'll see. There's still 3 yet to be called. So it'll be very narrow. It was a very narrow election, a very split country, a very divided country, a big Democratic vote drop off for Harris, which is, I think, the reason she lost. Everybody should understand this election was not a huge shift in one direction or the other. It was a split decision in a very split country with a very split vote.
Right. Exactly. Okay. One other thing before we say goodbye, because all the pundits on all of the networks are trying to figure out what happened, especially the Democratic pundits. So which direction should the Democrats go at this point? I think that's the question they're all asking. And you have some thoughts on that, right?
Well, there's a lot of finger pointing going on about, should we have not campaigned with Liz Cheney? Should we have embraced AOC? Should we have gone more woke? Did we go too woke? Should we have broken with Biden more? What should have happened? In hindsight, what the Democrats have to do is they need to have an economic policy and plan that speaks to people where they are, that doesn't talk down to them, that recognizes that a lot of the policies that are Democratic dogma on regulation, on environmental controls, raise costs, raise prices. The very week of the election in California, the Air Resources Board added regulations that'll raise the cost of gasoline 60 cents a gallon. It's those kinds of policies that Democrats have embraced that America is rejecting. And they need to understand that people, when they work and when they go to the store and buy things, that drives inflation. The stimulus plan that Biden adopted, which he was warned at the time by Larry Summers and Democratic economists, drove inflation. Everybody got a $600 check or whatever it was, but they also are paying more for groceries, and they're still paying more for groceries. We need to have, realistic free market economics. Now, the Trump administration has a chance to screw that up too on tariffs, and maybe they will, but we'll see. They have to have policies that speak to people, and they have to they've alienated themselves on these social issues, and there need to be common sense positions there. That probably is getting more blame or credit than it deserves, but it's still an issue, and it would still, it moved about 2 points nationally in an election that she lost by 1.5.
Well, surprisingly, or I guess not surprisingly, based on this show, I pretty much agree with everything you said there. I think that it's the economy. And I think if you go back to our shows at the beginning of this series, we talked about the economy right out of the box. So I think that is the main thing. Now, I don't place as much credence into the social issue things. It's really the economics of it, though. And if the economics was there, the social issues would go to the side and no one would pay attention to them. And the GOP probably wouldn't push as hard as they did. But it really comes down to being able to go to the grocery store and afford what you're buying. Those other issues they could care less about when the tire hits the pavement. That's my feeling on the whole thing. And maybe too much emphasis was put on all of those things. And the GOP took advantage of that, I think.
I think you're exactly right. If we had had a good, strong, humming economy, none of that would have moved the needle, and she would have won in a walk.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Well, we agree again. This is red versus blue. We have decided that, after the election, we said, there's not much going on. We're probably going to shutter this podcast, but it came to light very quickly that things are not over yet. So I think we're going to do this periodically. So keep your subscription to Red versus Blue, because you'll never know when one of these will show up. And we'll go probably till Inauguration Day. If you're still willing to do this, Keith.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's not like we're going to have, we won't have anything to talk about. And I think now that we have the cabinet in place, we're going to start seeing policy initiatives rolled out, some of which will be very sensible and some of which will be completely off the wall. Remember, Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk are driving the efficiency bus, and the Congressional Oversight Committee is being chaired by Marjorie Taylor Greene. What could go wrong with that?
Yeah, exactly. And again, entertainment value is important here. So that's one of the reasons we're going to hang in there. We'll probably come back again in 2 weeks after the Thanksgiving holiday. But, there's not going to be any set dates anymore. But we will be back. And I think we're going to go through until Inauguration Day. So if you haven't subscribed, and if you haven't listened to the old episodes, check it out. You'll see how close we were in a lot of cases to what actually happened. And join us for Red versus Blue. We'll be back in a couple weeks and continue this craziness. Thanks for joining us on Red versus Blue.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.